Hello everyone. Finally in Star Resonance. Actually, I've been in it for about a week. Well, actually, it'll be about a week by Saturday. And I have recorded a lot of footage, although apparently I might need to re-record some of it. I was trying to get footage for all the dungeons, and I have one for every single dungeon, I believe, except for Goblin Nest. And maybe not the Kanamiya Trial. I could be wrong as well. I might not have that one. But the purpose of this video is really to talk about like 2 or 3 things. All of them have to do actually with the dungeons here. And more importantly, some of the gear score, and I've talked about this in a previous video, but why they should probably have like a sync of your gear score, or in this case they call it ability score, but I really think that they need to look into some of these aspects that I'm going to talk about for potential changes. So the first thing actually is talking about ability score. What is it? It's kind of basically your power level, and there's a couple different ways to upgrade it. So one, your adventurer level actually does upgrade it, so that's part of it. But then your talents, which is basically your skill tree, but not your skills, just your actual like talent tree. It's this thing, right? And then these are your actual skills, the skill training, right? These are your skills and upgrading them, both like their level and their books and stuff like that. And then you have your actual gear. So includes like enhancing them via reforge or refining or embedding them with gemstones, all that type of stuff. And then you have the emblem, which to be honest, I don't really know why it's counted because none of this stuff applies to actual enemies or bosses. It only applies to void enemies. Even this little special effect is the same thing. But it is what it is. Still increases it. Admittedly, not as much as the other stuff does, but And then finally modules, which we don't have in the beta, but they will have an official launch as well. So that increases your ability score, right? But what does the ability score actually do for you? Well, it does one major thing, which is that it allows you to do content, right? So for example, if I go to the first dungeon, Goblin Nest, right? On normal mode, you can see the ability score here, and it's also got an evaluate button, and you can click on it and actually compare your stats to what they consider optimal. This is not always accurate, or at the very least, you won't always exceed or meet all of these conditions, right? So for reference, again, I'm like 11,839. I'm almost 12,000. I can do the final dungeon on hard, Dark Mist Fortress, but if you look at this, some of my stats are high, right? Like my intellect, my stamina, but my luck isn't high enough. My mastery is not high enough. My magic attack's higher. Armor's not high. Refined armor's not. Refined magic attack is, right? So some of it is like considered above optimal and some of it's not. So it's not really like a full-on super accurate evaluation. I think it's just kind of, it gives you an idea. So don't, fully assume that you need to meet all of that. But more importantly, let me go back to the other one. More importantly, it's used to tell you whether you can queue into the dungeon. If you don't meet the ability score, it will not let you queue into the dungeon, and I'll try and demonstrate this here, right? So if I switch to Frost Mage, which I don't have as high of a gear score with, you'll see my gear score is 10,350, so it's actually under this last one. So if I try to do Dark Mist Fortress on difficult and I try to match it, it'll give me this warning, right? That it requires this rating, you can't start matchmaking. You need to reach a higher thing, right? And it says recommend improvement. If you hit go or recommend improvement, I think it actually both of them bring you to the same screen, I'm pretty sure. Oh, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Right, if I hit this, this just brings me to like the dungeon thing, which I'm already at, so I don't know how helpful that is, but just to get other gear from dungeons, right? So it basically just tells you that you need to power up, basically. And that's fine, right? That makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is that you technically can do this, or you can still go into the dungeon. Let me just switch back here. You can go into this dungeon, right, with a pre-made by hitting the challenge button, right? Right now it says insufficient players in the team. That's because you need at least 3 people. But once you have people in your team, you can queue regardless of whether you meet the ability score or not. For example, the Dragonclaw Valley, right? I needed a first clear on this. I didn't meet the ability score. It's 10,050. I was 9,500, maybe 9,600. I didn't meet the ability score. I would not be able to queue into this. However, I had people that said that they were trying to do it and they needed a healer, and I was like, oh, I still need a first clear on that, but I'm under ability score. And they were like, yeah, no problem. So I joined a group, and we had a group of 5, and we went in with that. So I was 500 points below the ability score, which again would not let me queue for it. If I hit the match button, it wouldn't work. But because it was a pre-made party, we were able to just go in with challenge and just go in with our group of 5. And then, funnily enough, it was both a first clear, so I got one of these rings guaranteed, but then Bane showed up, which increases or guarantees a gold drop as well. So I got both my rings in the first clear of Dragonclaw Valley, while technically being at a lower ability score than I should have been to even do it in the first place. And I don't know why they allow that, right? Like, I get it, you can't match when you're lower than it, so you can't go and queue with randoms if you do that, but you are allowed to go into it with a pre-made. The reason that this is an issue, in my opinion, is that this is something that I've seen a lot of people talk about actually in the Discords with some of like the nerfing and buffing of classes, which is that sometimes when you have really powerful DPS, they're able to really perform outside of their ability score. And so people will literally be queuing into things that they don't meet the ability score for, they just make a pre-made party and do it. Could you argue that it's a challenge? Yes, but I would also argue that it might not be the intention of the game developers to have you be able to do these things below ability score. Like, that's the reason that they're there in the first place. And I'm not saying the ability score is a great evaluation of skill or gear for that matter. Again, like I showed you, I don't even meet all the optimal gear for the last dungeon, or all the optimal stats for the last dungeon. But it still kind of begs the question of why is it there then if people can just bypass it by forming a party, right? In Final Fantasy XIV, you can't queue into it with randoms if you're under the gear score requirement, and even if you have a pre-made party, you still can't go into it if you either don't have it unlocked or if you don't meet the gear or level score requirement, right? So there are actually things, even with pre-made parties in Final Fantasy XIV, to prevent you from doing any of that stuff. And then on top of that, the other thing, which is really what I mentioned in the videos, is that there's no level syncing, right? So again, I am currently 11,839, right? If I go back to that first dungeon, Goblin Nest, right? We'll ditch normal, right? And just go straight to difficult, right? This is 3,880, right? If a new player who's doing their first hard dungeon for the first time, or their first difficult one, right? Goblin Nest difficult, Goblin Nest hard. If they're doing that, they might be around this gear score, right? Maybe they'll be like 4,000 or something like that. I'm over double their ability score, right? And so obviously I am on a healer, right? This is actually one of the worst classes in the game, if not the worst class in the game, so maybe it wouldn't show as much, but even if I was on like my Ice Mage is still over double this basically, right? I will sweep through this dungeon like nobody's business compared to the 4,000 ability score player, right? I'll be doing so much more damage than them. We will breeze through the dungeon, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but is it good for that person? Because they're not experiencing the dungeon to the same length. We might clear it in like 2 or 3 minutes. Whereas the first time I ran this dungeon, it was probably closer to like, I don't know, 5, 6, maybe even 7 minutes because people's gear score was not high enough. And again, there's an argument about whether a dungeon needs to be that long, if it can be shorter, if it should be shorter. I think that those discussions are perfectly reasonable. But if the developers have this intention of what it is supposed to be like to play these dungeons, where like it's supposed to take this long, it's supposed to be this hard, whatever the intention is, they should try to maintain the integrity of that intention. And so in Final Fantasy, there's both level sync and gear sync, right? So your gear will be synced down and all that. In this game, there's none of that. And to be fair, as I've also mentioned in a previous video, I don't think that they need to do level syncing, right? Otherwise, you'd lose access to like half these skills. Like especially, I think these ones you don't even unlock until like level 30 or 40 or 50 and stuff like that. I do think level syncing is not a good idea. People complain about it in Final Fantasy because you get a level 50 dungeon, you're level 100, you lose half your skills. Some classes lose their entire identity at that level, right? So I don't need them to do that. I think that it's totally fine that they don't do level sync. But I think that the fact that they don't do an ability score sync, right, where like maybe 3,880 is the minimum, but maybe the maximum, kind of like what Final Fantasy does, where they have a maximum item level that they sync you down to, maybe this syncs you down to like 4,200 or something like that, or some ability score that is higher than this, but not that much higher, right? And if you do that, it'll maintain all the intention of the dungeon, right? How long it's supposed to be, again, all that difficulty and whatnot. Currently, it's not like that. So you can just find a pre-made if your friend is like 12 or 13,000 gear score or whatever, and you're like, I don't know, again, 3,880, maybe just about 3,900. Just breeze through the dungeon, have them carry you, basically, right? And I think that it's kind of unfortunate that it is like that, and I wish that there was an ability score sync, because I think it's just more enjoyable to experience these dungeons on their difficulty, right? I understand that people want to grind their gear and stuff like that, but there's already like basically you get a guaranteed gold every 5 clears, right? Like again, I'm not saying these dungeons need to be long, but the idea of a dungeon going from, you know, people clearing it on average like 7 to 8 minutes, and now it's like 2 or 3 minutes, like almost half the time, seems insane to me. And then the final thing that I want to talk about is that none of these dungeons are part of the story. And that both could be good or bad depending on what your viewpoint is of it. But right now in the story, there are instances where you go into basically a solo instance of the dungeon, right? So I know that you do Tina's Mine Realm solo, basically. I think you do Towering Ruin. I'm not sure about Kanomiya Trial, although there is a part of the story that clearly involves the area. You do Dark Mist Fortress solo, as well as the Dragonclaw Valley. But these are solo instances, and it's not even like necessarily the dungeon itself, although I think Dark Mist Fortress it kind of is, and same thing for Tina. But like you don't like queue with people. It doesn't force you to queue with people. In Final Fantasy XIV, the first dungeons you have to do, and mind you, they are not good dungeons. I know that I think they've revamped them and stuff like that. They're not good dungeons. They're not fun dungeons, but they are dungeons. And more importantly, you get real people with them, right? And so the issue is that the story doesn't force you to actually queue into these dungeons. In fact, you could get through the whole story. You could get to level 60 and not even know that this thing is here, because this is like part of a side quest, I'm pretty sure, to even like go to this area. So people could get through the whole story and the whole game without knowing that the dungeon queue is here, which is weird because the dungeon queue is a pretty integral part of the game, I feel like, content-wise. I mean, there are other things you can do, right? There's like life skills, there's the open world monster hunt stuff, your guild stuff and all that, but the dungeons are pretty important. I mean, they're on the feature thing, right? You have your chaotic realm. Even the daily dungeon is here, and that's a daily dungeon, right? It's down here. It's this one right here. And so it's weird to me that they kind of don't have it forced in the story. Again, I get it, but one of the issues surrounding it as well is that if a new player joins and they want to do Goblin Nest on normal, are they going to get real players if they join a month later down the official release, right? Like a month or 2 months into the game, are they going to get real players helping them or queuing in a Goblin Nest? Because as it is right now, you queue into a very specific dungeon. There are no like roulette queues like there are in Final Fantasy. You can queue for a leveling dungeon and it could be any of them, right? There's not really anything like that in this game. And I think that that could be to the detriment, because again, if a new player comes in 2 months down the line after launch and they are trying to do normal mode, are they ever going to get real people? And mind you, you can hit challenge and you'll get these AIs. What is it? Single? Look, you get these things. I'm going to hit cancel. It's going to start me in it anyway, but or maybe I missed hitting cancel, but I'll just leave the dungeon. But you see, you could start it with AI, which is fine. In Final Fantasy, you can do duty support or whatever as well. But you should be able to find real people. And it's significantly, or at least it's going to be significantly harder in this game in the long term to find real people to queue into the first dungeon. And again, I get it, like, you don't need to have real people, but man, for an MMO, it's so much more enjoyable to do your first dungeon with real people, just to know that they exist, really, but also to kind of facilitate that sense of community. You know, like, again, first Final Fantasy 14 dungeons, they're not great. In fact, I'd say that they're quite terrible. But having real people play alongside you kind of creates that idea of, oh yeah, I am playing an MMO. If I go through all these first normal dungeons with AI, I'm not going to feel like I'm playing with other people, because I'm not. I'm playing with AI. I'm basically single player. I'm playing a single player game. So it kind of sucks that it's like that. But again, it is what it is in that regard. And then the other thing involving the dungeons as well that I hope they will look into, which I talked about actually just earlier, is that since there is no roulette, right, or anything like that, we have the daily dungeon down here, right? This one, it's on Dragonclaw Valley. The daily dungeon is on Dragonclaw Valley. However, that is a separate instance than the dungeon Dragonclaw Valley. Okay, if you queue up for the daily dungeon, one, it's not even a daily dungeon, it's just the boss fight. It skips the dungeon part completely. And two, it still is not the same queue as Dragonclaw, right? So queuing into either normal or difficult will not match you with the people who are queuing into the daily dungeon. These are completely separate. And so one of the things that kind of confuses me is one of the issues could be at least somewhat mitigated or somewhat resolved if the daily dungeon at the very least queued you into the same pool of people that were queuing for the actual dungeon version, right? Even if it was just the normal one, I think that would have been fine. But the issue is that why is the daily dungeon completely separate from the actual dungeon that it's supposed to be? Why does it skip over all the mob pulls and just go straight to the boss? I don't really understand that. I think at the very least, if they don't want to add like actual like daily or leveling roulette or anything like that, or whatever the equivalent would be in this game, at least make the daily dungeon, the unstable space, make it queue into the same pool for people who are actually trying to queue for that dungeon. Again, even if it's just on normal mode, right? Of course, aside from that, I really think that they should just expand it so that you can have some sort of leveling daily. I know that the season pass technically does have like things for like, oh, if you go into unstable space, or chaotic realm, I think is just any actual dungeon. So it does kind of encourage you to do it to complete your season pass dailies. But I kind of wish there was just an actual leveling roulette or some sort of roulette thing that allows you to queue into all of the dungeons to help potentially anyone if you met the ability score for, right? Because I think it would make it easier for people who are new players down the line to still get people into the early dungeons, as well as just have that sense of community because you're actually playing with real players. And on a final note, because this was something I thought about last night as well, is you should be able to queue for dungeons without being here. It doesn't really make any sense. You have to go here to queue for dungeons. Unless you're joining like one of these parties. Like you could join one of these parties anywhere in the world, and so long as one person in the group, whoever the party lead is, can start the dungeon, it'll be fine. But what's weird is that you can go here to start the dungeon, but then you can, while you're waiting in queue, you could go anywhere else in the world. Which just makes you wonder, like, why do I even have to come here in the first place? Why can't I just, open the menu, maybe go to features, go to weekly, go here? Why doesn't this bring up the same menu of, like, the normal versus hard versus, like, master difficulty or whatever that'll come, and then I can just, like, queue into it this way? No, it just brings me to the facility, or tells me to go to the facility, and I have to teleport there to then queue. I don't know if there's some mechanism or some, like, coding, restriction as to why they force you to go to the city to queue. It's not the biggest deal, but it is going to be annoying for people to constantly go, and especially if they do end up adding more dungeons to this. I don't know if they're just going to expand this building, like are these slots going to open up or something, and that's where they're going to fit like at least 3 more dungeons, or I guess it would just be 2 more here. Or is there going to be like another layer to this, kind of how there is down here, right? Like this is empty, maybe this will turn into something. And I think the one on the other side's also empty. Like, what are we... When they add more dungeons, where are they even going to be built, right? And of course they could just change a lot of this stuff. That's all speculation. But at the very least, they should definitely allow you to queue for dungeons without having to come here. I don't really care how they do it, they just should, because it's annoying to have to come here every single time to queue for dungeons, especially if you were already out in the field doing something and then you're like, oh, I want to queue for a dungeon while I'm doing this. Well, you have to come here first, and then you have to go back out to the field while you're waiting in the queue. So it's just kind of annoying that it's that way. But again, all these things can be changed. I don't expect majority of them to be, but hopefully maybe there'll be at least some adjustments to some of the things I brought up in this video. Again, sorry that there's no actual gameplay, but I just wanted to kind of talk about it. And again, I have footage, I think, of all the dungeons, and I'll probably upload them without commentary later, probably after the CBT ends. But that will be about it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.